walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers, not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers.
Any questions? Anybody?
But his delight
Blair, you kick this off here. Tell us about
the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers, not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish.
Yes, it appears the colonization is complete, except, of course, Britt, Grizz, and I are on at exactly the same time right now. Good morning and welcome. I didn't know if I was going to do this. I was traveling yesterday. I was down in beautiful Redlands, California. What a beautiful, beautiful place. And then I was over in Ontario. That was beautiful. John Van Donk was not there. John and his wife are spending some time with John's mother-in-law, and so prayers for her would be welcome. But thank you very much for coming this morning. And I've got some, so yesterday, because I had a meeting of which probably 3 hours of my attention were demanded, but I got to Southern California at 7:30 in the morning and had to leave at 8 o'clock at night. So I had lots of time to read and watch some videos, and I really had a very enjoyable, slow day. Made a couple of little videos for the membership section, had a little dog training video in there, and then just some thoughts about conferences, So yeah, so some of those are in the membership section. But I wanted to begin. I'm going to play with some new things in StreamYard today. I'm slowly learning how to do this. The title of the show comes from the fact that there is something, not Hermes, something new has come into the corner. We are being studied, and we are being studied by permission. Clara, in fact, sent me an email on February 20 asking for permission to study us. And it was like, we're all putting this on YouTube. Study away. She is a graduate student in sociology. And let's hear a little bit about how this whole crazy thing started. And so Chad is sort of the bleeding edge of the corner in many ways. If there's an idea, Chad is about the lightest trigger in the room, and he will start it. So he jumped right in.
Some very special guests. We have something a new series that I'm starting right now, or that was started over here, called the Friday Morning Frameless. I have no idea what that means, but it sounded like a cool thing to do. And so this is that episode. Today we have Lance. You all know.
Now, a number of people in the comment section noted that flameless, brainless, brainless, blameless. Chad, you can do just about anything with your channel.
Lance, say hello, Lance. Hi, Lance. We have the General Griswold Grimm down there. Say hi, Grizz. And we have Clara.
Now, Grizz is a pretty... if you're gonna, the link will be below. You can find it on the Friday Morning Nameless. I have to adjust my camera. Oh, there's that a little better. No, it's even worse. Yeah, I know some of you are worried with all the branding that somehow we're going to have high production values. Fear not. I will sabotage the high production values on a very regular basis. Where's my garbage stick? Where's my garbage stick? Here's the garbage stick. Okay, well, as long as I sit right. Well, anyway, so Grizz is pretty shy. And so if you watch the video, the conversation doesn't really get going for the first hour. And that's pretty normal for a conversation. I've mentioned before, I had a pastor friend who always had his clock behind the people, and he would always set his clock forward, because if the appointment was for an hour, he knew that he wouldn't actually get anywhere in the conversation for the first 45 minutes. So he just turned the clock forward. They'd all feel late and they'd accelerate them. So anyway.
Clara.
Hi, Clara.
Say hi, Clara. Okay, guys. This is going to be very strange. I have no idea what is about to happen, but I would like you to get to know Clara. Clara, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us all about why you are here?
Well, hi. Why I'm here is it's an existential question beyond me, but I am really grateful for you having me here. I'm a sociologist. I study how people move into and out of their religious identities, other identities, and I'm really interested in kind of seeing what's happening in the corner, how people got here, what they do, what they might do next. Yeah.
Now,
how did you find Clara? How did you find PVK?
I actually started this project a long time ago. I sit in a coffee shop and I do maybe what you might think of as randos conversations. I talk to people about these things. And one of my friends there at the coffee shop sort of drew the connection, excuse me, has been telling me about this community for a long time, and then introduced me to this world.
Yeah. So I ended up getting an email from Claire, and she says, yeah, so my friend Sourdough Neil sent me your way, and so I'd like to talk to you. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I called Neil today to ask him about you a little bit, and he's like, oh, that's so cool. She's gonna, come on and stuff. And so Sourdough Neil gets his name from yours truly down here. And
amazing. I eat his bread. So
is it good? See, now I met him over the weekend. I went to his church actually.
And then Chad goes on to describe how much he did or didn't like the Orthodox Church, and I'll leave you to that to go find it. Chad being the Lutheran that he is, so she has in fact come into the corner to study us, and I know some of that is going. Some of you are going to be really disturbed by that. I think it's actually a good thing. And when she wrote me and sort of asked permission to watch our videos, I was like, it's on YouTube. You don't need any permission to watch our videos. And I guess they're real strong rules about who she can study and how they are studied. And I guess all of that is good. So I told her, please study away and find out what you find. And what followed in that video was something that many of us have been looking for a long time, which is sort of an on-ramp into this little community, because many of us have people and we value it and we would like to introduce people to it, but we have absolutely no way to do so. We have now, again, what John Vervaeke said to what he said to Jordan Hall, he thought Fancy Vervaeke Words was a put down, and Fancy Vervaeke Words is by no means a put down. Fancy Vervaeke Words is a loving term, because we fancy things are often things that are gifts, and John Vervaeke gave us these fancy words as a gift. Would you rather get a plain towel as a bridal at your bridal shower, or would you rather get a fancy towel? And so we have fancy words from John Vervaeke, but we have all this struggle of in-house language, which is what happens when any community gets together and they start to know each other. And you know how twins develop their own little secret language. Here we have our own little corner language, and just as with Christianese and churches, this corner language becomes a problem. And so one of the things we're always looking for is a way to be able to introduce ourselves and explain to people what we are doing. And what this sociologist studying us gives us an opportunity to do is to be seen and to be explained back to us, because the truth is we really don't know what we're doing. And so what proceeded on this video were actually a lot of really good explanations, and I'm not going to play it in order. Like I said, it takes a little while to get going. There were some really nice introductions to Grizz and to Chad and to Lance, and I don't know if I'll get to them. But by way of explaining, as the video reached its end, they really did begin to explain to one another what is going on.
Absolutely. And so, like, the conversations I have with people here, I don't have a lot of people in my real life that want to have these types of conversations. You know, the one thing I would say is I didn't have, like, I just realized this a couple months ago. My meaning crisis was when I was watching it really hit, it started happening with all this cultural war stuff. I was just seeing that this political stuff was not getting fixed. Like something was broken, and I just could tell that something was wrong. I had faith. I have faith in everyday Americans that, if given a chance to vote, they'll try and keep if you give normal people the opportunity, that they'll be able to keep it somewhere in the center, And then I was kind of a political wonk. So I knew certain counties, so I could track certain counties and when there were certain trends or whatever. And on that election night in 2020, when I went to bed and then I woke up at 6 a.m. and I saw all these weird anomalies, like the one that happened was in your state, Wisconsin, Chad, where they dropped 100% of all these votes. And the vote went like this, and it went to 300,000 overnight. And I realized they stopped all the voting. And when I woke up that morning, I knew immediately, oh my God, our votes don't matter anymore. And I only knew that because for 20 years I had tracked at this real detail level, and I saw these anomalies, and I saw them forcibly kicking people out of polling stations in Philadelphia. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. This thing, I had this faith in the United States. I had this faith that this thing.
Now, what he said right there is he had a faith, and that then becomes a theme in this, that this is a story of domicide. This is a story of the end of mass media. This is a story of no longer being able to orient. And so what we do when we are disoriented by these screens, by the fact that we've got dissonance, we don't know who to trust. Should I be team MSNBC? Should I be team Fox? Should I say I don't believe the mainstream media because both are mainstream? That goes into, I've got Lyme's disease and the doctor can't help me. I've got long COVID and the doctor can't help me. I've got this strange disease and the doctor can't help me. So I'm going to try the Lion's diet, or I'm going to try a vegan diet, and everyone is sort of lighting out for the territory because the authorities in the world cannot be trusted. The priest that I went to abused children. The pastor that I was speaking the word of God had sex with the youth group leader. The on and on and on. Trust has fallen. And our most basic way to trust is building conversation, reputation over time. And we've got to do this. But now we find ourselves not in a village where we're going down to the stream to wash clothes together, or going out to the field to harvest the field together, where there's a good, healthy gossip network that is sort of keeping reputational tabs on everyone. And everybody has been known from the things that they have done since birth. In fact, so much of American society has been about escaping our reputations from birth, because they both bind us and blind us and imprison us. And it's very difficult to, if you've ever been in a small community, you know, it's very difficult to transcend that self you used to be. So now we're all chasing jobs all around the country. We're all doing different things. What do we do?
Was it so corrupt that they literally would not give the regular people their opportunity to speak? And it became so obvious to me. So my meaning crisis was, and this was right before I hit the bridges of meeting, is, you know, I had to try and figure out to, like, oh, this thing is much more corrupt than I ever thought that it was. And this wasn't just one political party. I mean, this is just, the whole thing was so far corrupt that the people weren't going to be able to have their say. And that, I had to grieve that. Like, because I just had this faith. And so, you know, one of the things that really happened to me is that I needed to have that political thing totally smashed in me. And that was a good thing. Like, that was, in some ways, like almost the USA was an idol, like this belief in, of course we weren't as good as we needed to be.
And there it is. The USA was an idol, and it got smashed. But I need to live within something. I need to live within a worldview. And I need to live in a worldview and a sense-making network that can be trusted. And so this is exactly what's forming all over social medias, is everybody is trying to form new little sense-making networks that can be trusted.
But there was this ideal that was out there that I believed my whole life. And so that was my meaning crisis. And what I realized was I didn't want to keep having the same conversations where people are just doing this, because that's not going to work. And that wasn't the solution. And so
and that, of course, is what we saw on YouTube in how many different ways. We see the political this, we see the religious this, we see all of this going on. And, you know, even today, well, this, of course, gets attention because we as creatures in Patterson, when, you know, two kids would fight and then one kid would lose and then the moms would come out and fight. And then everyone in Patterson would show up for the moms fighting in the street, because we're just all drawn to this. And so in this attentional economy, it's click, 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 until finally this becomes mapped territory. And it's like, yeah, that ain't going to work. What are we going to do now?
Really liked about coming in here, the first thing that I was drawn to is people were having conversations about tough things, and they weren't stuck in the political, like they weren't arguing about red, blue stuff. Like, they were talking about really interesting things and going back and forth. And so there was good faith dialogue going on. I found that first that fascinated me. but then the deeper I got to know and I got to meet these people, these are amazing. Like, they're amazingly smart people. Some educated, some not. There was all this wisdom and there was all this stuff. It was it was quite fascinating to me, really, what was going on. Meaning crisis.
Oh, shoot.
Conversation.
And so, of course, we have to, you can't live without this. That's sort of the sociological analog to personal nihilism.
Where I was able to take what was a lot of wisdom and a lot of things that I had, and I was able, it took it to the next level. I just felt like I didn't realize how many of the answers that I, weren't good enough yet. And then people were having these depth.
Okay, and there you have the Christian deconstruction. There you have churches within the box and YouTube within the box, and they just keep hammering the same things in the box. Maybe they get a little better, but basically it's all about the box. And then you run into something that just makes you doubt the box. I forget who it was. One of the randos conversations. Oh, that's right. It wasn't shared. The best randos conversations are not shared. They can't be. They just can't be. But this woman told me with her Christian deconstruction, Peterson had verbalized it perfectly. When her pastor had moral failure, she not only lost faith in her pastor, she lost faith in institutions of trust. And so she descended into domicide and nihilism.
Conversations where I was able to take what was a lot of wisdom and a lot of things that I had, and I was able, it took it to the next level. And so the depth of what you can contemplate here is something that I've never experienced in any other group or community that I have. And so when you can do that, it's amazing. And the one thing I have our good friend Jess P, who's a part of this community, started talking about where if you have these big hairy questions and they're not getting answered in your life, and it's lots of different types of big hairy questions you have, like the hard ones, when you can.
So some of you saw Bowtie Brian on the Freddie and Paul show. Bowtie Brian has made his way up to Sacramento twice for Estuary and for church and for the Freddie and Paul show. He got the full treatment. He got the Livingstone's hat trick. And in the Estuary group, he said, so Bowtie Brian and his buddy Sean, Sean's video will get released soon from the No Wait No Ads. They started one of the largest homeless shelters in the country, and they are providing full wraparound services. It's a big catchword in California. And he talked about wicked problems. What are wicked problems? Wicked problems are the kinds of problems that there's no answer to, sort of in the modernistic, I'm rephrasing him, in the modernistic way that we think are answers, how we have been formed by technology. And technology has said, this is what we are. This is the modernistic answer. This is the solution. This is the policy. This is the drug. This is the technology that will fix homelessness. And you realize that there is no such thing. And so wicked problems can only be addressed by wisdom. And again, wisdom doesn't dispel the problem. Wisdom allows you to enter in with the spirit of finesse, and you begin to be able to work the problem.
Come together when all of a sudden something clicks, like you understand it, like something makes sense. When that comes together and you just said, that's healing. Like when you can integrate something, where you had this disconnect, or maybe you didn't know it exists, but when all of a sudden you can integrate something and you have that aha moment. And what that is like, once you've learned something, you'll never be the same again. Like once you know something and understand something at some level, and those tumblers go together, every now and again we have some of those moments, and those are those moments to where, like, so that'd be like that spark, that moment that Jess would call.
And those moments are almost always, they're interpersonal. Sometimes you get that insight and it gets triggered by watching a video. Jordan Hall said something to someone. I won't repeat the source, but he said something to someone. I probably shouldn't have said Jordan Hall, but anyway, he was reflecting on the Symbolic World Summit. No criticism of it, but saying basically it's not about another idea. And I think this is the key to understanding Jordan Hall's conversion movement into Christianity, his desire to get baptized, his desire to get married to his partner on a Wednesday night and have the potluck be the reception, his desire to live it, because here is a man who has been feeding on ideas for all of his life, and he realized that the solution is not an idea. You have to live into the solution, and it's a move of wisdom. It's a move of wisdom that addresses the wicked. It doesn't mean that suddenly everything will be great, but it means that in the journey, you will grow.
That's healing, you know? And I think a lot of what I've seen happen.
And that's right. That's healing.
With people too. And I've seen transformation, and I've seen people move from, they were once one way and now they're this way, or they talk about the struggle they had and now they're this different way. I think that what happens in this little corner is people engage in these conversations and those things happen. I think what you see is a lot of healing. And so we talk about big, weighty, heavy things.
And that's exactly right. And that's the corner is both larger and smaller than we see. Because, yeah, somebody mentioned in the comments, yeah, lurkers can't be studied. So keep on lurking. There is nothing wrong with lurking. Peugeot said in the question and answer from the Symbolic Word Summit, which was great, the last question and answer, he talked about sacrifice. And I would, you know, I expect at some point those videos will come out. And then I'm going to want to talk about misery, deliverance, gratitude, because sacrifice is in the gratitude part. Sacrifice is the response. But what's happening, why certain of us are really addicted to this, is because we are being healed as we do this with each other. And what are we being healed from? It's not just one thing, and we're learning all the things that we're being healed from, but we're leaning into it more and more.
Sometimes, and then the other times it's happened is I've met Chad in real life. I haven't met Grim yet. I got to get that taken care of. But I've had conversations with people offline where we've reached out and they, you know, seek me. I sought other people out, where you start developing, relationship, and you can get, in a real private conversation, you can get really vulnerable with one another, about struggles you're having or those sorts of things. So I think that sort of thing that happens is, for me, what I think a lot, it's a part of the magic about what this little corner does.
And you can see her taking notes, because this is what she's here for, because this is what we're all looking for. We're all looking for healing. We're all looking for, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy. It's a yoke. My yoke is easy, but my burden is light. This is why you memorize scripture, because you can pull it up when it needs to be spoken. Now, Grizz continues with this, and Grizz doesn't say much. He's mostly smoking and having his, whatever he's drinking in his cup. But he's, as usual with Grizz, his words, when he really, like, I skim through. She had something to say about his show, which I think was, and I want to talk about that later if I remember, but I skimmed through his program, through the branding and everything, because I'm always looking for the nuggets. It might come sometimes when he's adjunct professing, or when but there's usually, his show is kind of like a church service. There's music and there's branding and there's announcements. I'm a good Protestant. I just wait for the little piece of the sermon where the gold is hidden. Oops, this one.
I'd like to ramble for a couple.
Please do.
You say what are the things that brings the people here? I think are our commonalities, and a lot of those commonalities are, I think it's people who have been wrong for extended periods of their lives before, like for a matter of years, and come to the realization that they have been wrong. And I think that it's people who have noticed the polarization and corruption of their information sources and have come so they come with this package of what they believe and what they've thought, but they're open to the notion.
Now, again, part of the reason when I do videos, I don't just like many video editings, they'll just go to the one person who's talking and you lose the rest. And there are moments and there are good reasons for that. But I like to keep everybody up because I like to keep watching all of the parties because I want to know their reaction, because that's actually what happens in real life when we're having a conversation together. We're not just watching the person who's speaking, we're watching each other.
That they've been deceived. And basically they've thought, but they're open to the notion that they've been deceived. And basically we all start wandering around together, looking for what's not deception, because we're in this is an unprecedented time for humanity when all of information is at our fingertips and we can compare and contrast the different belief systems and see things why they are the way they are. We can follow the purchases of stock companies and find out that BlackRock and yada yada just own each other, and together they own everything. And all of this, we're all coming into this information, and it's way too much information for any of us. So we've come together and we're trying to figure what's going on out together. And I see it as a sea of information, and I call it the fire ant flotilla, because like fire ants cling to each other in a flood to make a raft. And that's seemingly what we're doing with these channels and being together in the comments and such. So I think that we're all in that context, the modern human context together, and our trusted sources of information have become less trustworthy, that we're now trying to find, again, the human connection, particularly when we notice that when they clamp down on us, the human connection is what they're trying to sever. So that makes us cling to it and each other tighter.
And I thought that was so key. The human connection is what they're trying to sever, whether for people that's intentional or not. If there is a consequence of modernity, a consequence that there's fine books written about this on the Industrial Revolution. One of the things that the Industrial Revolution did was rip apart the agrarian fabric of society. Urbanization. Now, this obviously has had iterations throughout history, because you can see, for example, with the Roman Empire, you can see urbanization happening, and then with the sort of the fall of the Western Empire, you collapse back into an agrarian. And about the time of after the Black Death, of course, when you'd have plagues, people would head out to the countryside and spread out. So plagues sort of kept people moving back and forth with this. And then industrialization sort of brought people together, and for good reason, because life was better in the city for many people. But of course, there's always trade-offs. So, but then plague, people would go out. Well, with industrialization and sanitation and modern medicine, we've been in a long centripetal pull, or is it centrifugal? It's a centrifuge, it's bringing it all to the middle, a long centrifugal pull. And this is what's keeping us together. And it's also straining and ripping the units of the family. Harari talks about this in his book, Sapien, where basically we exchange institutions have been government institutions, sometimes church institutions, various institutions have been safety nets and replacement for familial institutions, because familiar institutions are by no means perfect. But there's been so much strain on these very organic, deep, ancient institutions among us. And when I say that these implicit institutions, that now that we're in a process of domicide where many of these formal modern institutions are failing, now we're just left as refugees.
If we come to see that, at least. And who knows how much of what is coming together has been directed together by the algorithm, simply because we managed to have 3-hour videos that keep people watching for 3 hours, and that's what the algorithm likes. But
now Lance continues.
That have come here have had something they thought held, maybe a position they held deeply, that they've come to change, that they've come to learn something new, and have had some new revelation, and that takes a bit of open-mindedness to do that. I also think that what helps you do that is if you've experienced some sort of crisis of self, and you're asked, like I said, you're asking the big hairy questions and some of those other things. I think, and not everyone who comes in our little corner is open-minded, and there are certainly some people that probably haven't changed a whole heck of a lot, and then there are others that had massive transformations. So so one thing that happened to me, talk about calling out BS. So here's there's a few transformations, but here's the transformation that happened to me. I was a charismatic evangelical house church pastor, right? And I come in and somebody asked me a hard question. And this is a theological question, but I don't know if that matters to you, but it's around this concept of the penal substitutionary atonement theory of Christ's crucifixion. It's basically God was pouring his wrath down on, whatever. And so he had to pay the price for our dirtiness and everything else. And I had some milieu in that. I was Methodist or whatever. But at any rate, there was this conversation, and a good friend of mine, who's a really good friend now, Luke, says, what are you? Like, are you a pastor or something? Because I was annoying him the way I was preaching, kind of being preachy on this thing. And then there was a woman named Sherry Studer who asked me, he's like, why are you so sure of that? And I listened to that. And then one of the things that connected with me is like, I realized I needed to listen to that thing. And she didn't say it in a mean way, but she also said it in a stern and honest way. Right. And I immediately sensed that. So what do I do?
And I think a part of the dream of why we see interest in orthodoxy, well, partly because orthodoxy is sort of the hot new chick on the American church scene, even though she's not new at all. But again, it's this someone, what video was it? Oh, it was the other video that I'm going to play some of today. So yes, Monica, I am doing some commentary on these videos. The Orthodox, it's the same impulse that's fueling different kinds of fundamentalisms, and it's fueling complementarian churches and reactionary churches and deeply conservative reformed movements. And it's a going back. It's an attempt to stop the domicide that's been going. Now I'm going to switch to another video that was a Symbolic World Summit recap done by Pete at Strange Theology. Had Christian and had Justin on there, and Justin recaps something that was said there by Martin Shaw. By all accounts, Martin Shaw was the belle of that ball. Not that the other things weren't great, but for many people, Martin Shaw was sort of a revelation in that group. And you can see why when Justin sort of retells what's going on there.
Context of the digital world. Now, the idea is okay, right there. Yeah. That was one of the things he said, in his first talk. So be famous for 5 miles means like you should be known for whatever it is that you give value to the world. Let's say if you're like him, you're a storyteller, not to be world famous necessarily, because there's something different than being like respected and being famous. Because once you're famous, then you're being projected upon. You're it's mostly projection, not real engagement. And I think people notice this when they pop above a certain level of status online, and all of a sudden the people they're interacting with, it's all projection and it's not real, you know. So you want to, I think, want to be right under that, not so big but respected in some sense in terms of what the value is that you can bring to the community. And so famous for 5 miles in our world might mean just showing that you have something to say. You know, so starting a YouTube channel or doing something participatory. I notice it on campus when someone makes a good little documentary or film, they're famous on campus. They're not famous. It's not like someone off campus is going to be like, oh, that short documentary you made as a student is amazing. But like within their community, they're famous for 5 miles. You know? And so this is the point Martin Shaw said, that when there's no avenue to become famous for 5 miles, that's when people start to go into destructive behavior of like wanting to be an internet celebrity, like kids want to be an Instagram influencer, right? Because there's no pathway towards gaining the respect when you put work into something and you want to get a little bit of respect back or appreciation or whatever it is for you, for the time and effort that you put in. Then you're going to say, well, I can get the dopamine by, what's the name that the young kids use? Thirst trap. You know, I can put a thirst trap out there, and then I can get all that. You know, but the dopamine.
Someone should tell him a little bit more about those thirst traps. But that's, you know, when Mary Harrington talks about the Instagram to OnlyFans pipeline, well, that is a thirst trap. And I don't watch much Daily Wire, but I don't even know that the young woman's name that's on Daily Wire. She had a thing. She had a thing where she had some video of a woman who was, you know, doing porn. And this woman was talking about how this destroyed her relationship with her parents and, you know, destroyed relationships with boyfriends, just destroyed. And so I love this not famous for 15 minutes, famous for 5 miles. And maybe on YouTube, we can have famous for 500 subs. And that's it. Famous for 500 subs. And just, you know, that's all you need. And yeah, hierarchies are going to form. Status hierarchies are going to form. Some people are going to go. But again, Jordan Peterson's story is in many ways a cautionary tale. Now, some of us might say, oh, I wish I had 6 million YouTube subs and a best-selling book that brought millions of dollars. And who knows what his contract with Daily Wire is valued at, yada, yada, yada. But don't forget that it nearly cost him his life. It nearly cost him his wife, but for the grace of God and her healing, it cost him 2 careers that he loved, 2 careers that, you know, I appreciate what Jordan is doing, but almost all of us in this corner that have watched a ton of Jordan would say, Jordan, those classroom lectures of Jordan's 2016, 2017, those were the best. You know, those were amazing. Can he do better than that? Well, it's hard to value things. But so famous for 500 subs, maybe.
System is there for a reason. It's not like, you know, it's just maladaptive when we're addicted to the dopamine, you know. So I think that having, and this is where Paul Vanderklay has a lot of wisdom, I think, is like, let's curate a little bit of a community where you can be famous for 5 miles, not 5 physical miles, but within a certain sphere of a small community.
Yeah.
And
put value out there.
And that's exactly what I see happening. You know, you look at Chad's channel, about 500 subs, Grizz 1.27. You know, even some of the channels that have been around a little longer and have done some things that would give them more reach, Karen Wong's channel, Sevilla King's channel, a bunch of these Transfigured, Sam's channel. Some of the people in this corner that we have seen are at least as brilliant as the people who are going on. They're far more brilliant than a lot of the people who go on Rogan or Chris Williamson. And they're far more grounded, and they do much more. So don't despise the little channels. In fact, I think Famous for 500 subs is a good place to be, or Famous for 5 discords. And I think as we travel this, we have to really continue to watch the practices that we participate in. Now, this next clip from this conversation is Pete talking about conferences. And because sure, Lance did a little live stream this morning, and scale will happen. And what you have to figure out is how to scale properly. And nobody scales perfectly. And scale is the demise back when I got to North America in the late 90s, and the denomination was really pushing the seeker movement, and the home missions people were sending me free books and for pastors to talk about. And they were sending all of these business books. I read, can't tell you how many business books I read in the late 90s. And we were, of course, supposed to apply this to church. Now you look back on that and you think, oh boy, partly because, Good to Great, was it Good to Great? That was like the story of Hewlett Packard. And it's like, Hewlett Packard. But when I think, sorry, Hewlett Packard, when I think at what's at the top of the PC hierarchy, Hewlett Packard does not come to mind. And these businesses sort of rise and fall. Same with Pixar, same with Apple. And they almost always hit scale. And people climb to, this is this Peter principle, they basically climb to the level of their inadequacies and their lack of competencies. And that's where they peak off. And so these things obviously still apply to churches, but that's why scaling it's both organic, but if it's, cancer is basically growth without proper proportion. And so this is what Pete had to say about conferences.
Conference or at something like that, who ends up by myself. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I give off the air or something of like being a loner, or I got a scowl on my face or something like that. People, I don't know what it is, I've never, and I go to like pastors conferences and stuff like that. So think about that in the context of like going to a pastors conference, but still feeling very much alone. This summit was not.
Pastors are some of the loneliest people I know. Men are lonelier, generally speaking, than women. But pastors can be very lonely by virtue of their occupation and their job. Now, Monica said in the comments, she said, scaling requires team. One of the things that came out during the Symbolic Summit was that before the summit, Team Jonathan Peugeot nearly had a train wreck. And they had a train wreck because you can find how many people quitting YouTube. I've commented about this in the past in previous videos, because they got into this because they were an artist or they were playing with this and they met the level of their incompetency. And usually the way out of it is to have a team. But once you have a team, the team has to be managed. And not everyone who's an artist is a good team manager. And then there's legal entities. I very much recommend Phil Visser's little book on Bob the Tomato, because Phil Visser had a clever little idea. He liked puppets, and then he got into computer animation, and computers were new. And he had Larry and Bob and Veggie Tales, and VHS was new. And so they were selling VHS, and everybody simply assumed that DVD was going to be like VHS, but it wasn't, because of course, what was changing at that time was also the distribution networks. Now, Netflix looked a little further ahead, but Phil Visser was having all of this success, and then people were like, you got to make a movie, you got to make a movie. All the experts said you got to make a movie. And so then he leveraged almost everything to make a movie. What he didn't understand was that the Christian bookstore market was changing, Christianity was changing, the media industry was changing, and basically they put all of this money into growth, into scaling up to do this movie so they could continue to scale. and the whole thing collapsed, and he never had good legal advice early on, and his IP was in his company. And so when his company got bankrupt, the same people that owned how many other defunct cartoon characters like Casper the Friendly Ghost now owned Bob and Larry. And so Bob and Larry became a cautionary tale, owned by the same people that owned Casper the Friendly Ghost. And then they tried to do with that, and then they'd hire, I mean, the whole thing. So Christians and Christian ministry and media ministry is all part of this. We keep talking about Christian YouTube, and you've just got to figure this stuff out. Okay, back to Pete's story. And I want to start it from the beginning again.
I've always been the person at a conference or at something like that who ends up by myself. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I give off the air or something of like being a loner, or I got a scowl on my face or something like that. People, I don't know what it is, you know. I've never, and I go to like pastors' conferences and stuff like that. So think about that in the context of like going to a pastors' conference, but still feeling very much alone. This summit was not like that.
Well, think of the consumerism thing that I was talking about earlier. The idea of having a product, selling the product, and then people come to buy. So there's a real sense of like, well, the product is the book table and the whatever, whoever the speakers are. And then you're going to take that information, you're going to take it back to your hometown.
Now, part of what makes Justin so valuable in this corner is that he works in the industry. What is the industry? Well, the industry is Hollywood. The industry is the mass formation network, not the news industry, because that's a little too direct. It's the worldview shaping industry. And so Justin, being part of the industry and being a smaller player in it, completely understands the waves that come in and go out. And at the same time, he teaches in a Christian college. My conversation with Nate, I mean, part of the reason I release videos, you say a conversation with someone like Nate or Aaron Wren a little bit after, is I like to spend a week kind of thinking about the conversation. And then sometimes I make clips about it. And I just don't have time to make clips about it. But so Nathan Jacobs is also increasingly deep in the industry. And so we talked about gatekeepers. We talked about a bunch of things there. And part of what has happened in a similar way to which the Protestant Reformation provoked changes in the Roman Catholic Church, and the Orthodox, by virtue of a whole variety of things, sort of sat that out. They have other dynamics that, like I said, I got to do a lot of reading yesterday. They have other dynamics that most of us in the West are blind to because we just don't know the stories. But just like what happened with the Protestant Reformation and the Roman Catholic Church, the main spiritual formation engine of the West was the church. And that in many ways was supplanted in the 20th century by the industry. And of course, evangelicalism, which is the ultimate Me Too, tried to keep up. And so we have Christian rock, and we have Christian this and Christian that. It's all me too, me too, me too. I'm going to do it like you. And it's usually almost always worse. Not always, but often. And so conferences, same thing. And now Justin's like, yeah, I can critique the little Me Too Christian thing going on here because I'm watching it happen on the big stage.
Kind of a thing. I feel like that is a lot of conferences. And also when I go to academic conferences, it's the same thing. It's like, well, I'm here to present my paper because I'm trying to get published and do some, whatever it is. Whereas here it's very participatory because of that curated online space where everyone's kind of participating. So the book table isn't really, it's not like we're here to sell books. Like if you go to the Conference for American Society of Religion, I think it's called AAR conference. There is a massive book like it's like a book fair, and it's just like tables and tables of books and publishers, and it's real networky sort of thing. It's like, here, you know, I'm going to sell you my book and you whatever, you know, like that. Yeah. That's going on. Whereas this is not like that. It feels more like an invitation to participate in some way in a communal activity.
John, you may have missed this. Jonathan said that at the very beginning of his first. It was either at the beginning or the end. He's like, he was doing it for himself, but he was also doing it for the people that were coming. Is I want this to be about connecting people that are artists or that are creative people or thought people. He made that statement. I think the interesting thing, but they didn't. The structure that they built, that they did some intention because.
And now, while it's very true that, again, this dynamic that in some ways it was Justin talking about a couple of guys on an Orthodox. Oh, it was at the conference. He said, you know, the Orthodox priests went out for a smoke and they basically said, yeah, we sat out the whole Protestant Reformation. And so it's sort of like how the Irish saved Christianity. We have this old knowledge and we're able to bring it back onto the stage. And I think that's part of the wisdom of the appendix. That's part of the wisdom of the deeply conservative, because the deeply conservative, they don't save everything because they can't, but they do save some things. And that means that you actually have a tremendously old institutional memory so that you're not always captive to the moment. But the downside of that is you also don't have some of the wisdom that the people who have been paying a heavy price for keeping up with the new thing have had all along the way. So again, there's just all these trade-offs.
You could have lunch there. They brought in food trucks that were right outside the conference center. The structure that they built, that they did some intention because you could have lunch there. They brought in food trucks that were right outside the conference center. You could immediately leave and go sit down. And there were platform people hanging out in those spaces too. And then
I love that. You know, again, just watch language develop. Platform people. Who are the platform? Do the platform people come out? One of my earliest memories of Calvin Sem was a vigorous debate broke out at the seminary retreat. And if you think you want to see an awkward group of people, go to a seminary retreat, which is really hilarious because most of them are going to be pastors. At the seminary retreat, and it was my friend who's been on the channel, Kevin Adams, basically stood up and challenged the faculty that they don't come out to the student lounge for donuts. And a particularly prickly professor stands up and says, I don't see the value of having students see jelly, you know, a jelly donut dripping from my face.
The other part of it, though, is, but there wasn't like a hugely intentional effort to force that on people. Whereas I've heard Paul, the conversation I had with Paul Vanderklay about that was having built-in community structures as a part of like estuary protocol, kind of as part of a conferencing. But Pete, I guarantee you, if you had gone, that would not have been your experience, because we would have. We would be having dinner. Yeah, you would. Yeah, and it would have been more than that. I mean, because that happened. Because if you had seen other people, you could, you had been on, even if just sharing a stream once or twice with somebody is actually pretty powerful. I mean, I don't know if I had shared a stream with Nate Heil, maybe once or twice, but I felt like we kind of knew, like there was a known, there was a knowingness, and
a lot of what's happening in this corner is we are sort of hijacking these technologies and spirits that have been hijacking us. And one of them is the silver screen effect, where you have this illusion that you know someone. I think he's going to talk about it with Malcolm Muggeridge. I don't know if I clipped that part, but you have this illusion that you know someone. You don't really know them, but you know them a little bit. And so what that's meant at these conferences, which I heard again and again and again at Chino, which is there's no small talk, that you know at least someone a little bit so that you can begin the conversation. And again, it's all these trade-offs. You don't really know them, but you know them. It's sort of like, I put where is it? I'm so dyslexic. No, the other way. Gosh, oh man, it's terrible. I put the virtual not alone bubble up for the live stream. So why am I including some of Grizz's branding? Because again, we want people who are 500 subs famous, or 100 subs famous, or 50 subs famous. We want people who are famous. We want people that are more like Tom Bombadil. Now, you're going to need your Gandalfs, you're going to need your Aragorns, but you also need your Hobbits, and you need your Tom Bombadils. And so I want to point to this. If people are no longer watching my videos because they're watching Grizz and Chad, that's a success. A role that I've played is my channel's a little bit larger. I've got a little bit more status in some areas. YouTube will promote my videos a little bit more, but then I can help, that's the whole idea behind an estuary and a title pool. Help people find their niche. And Chad and Grizz and all of these 500 sub channels, or 1,000 sub channels, or even 5,000 sub channels, they can find their little niche, so they can have their community, so they can do their sense making, so they can, multiple layers of need, so they can have a home. And yes, is it second class because it's online? Yes, but a second class home is better than no home at all. And that is what people are facing. Long before I got into YouTube, I was recording my Sunday school classes. I've got audio recordings of my Sunday school class that go back a long ways. And then I was just playing with podcasts, and I was putting them out on podcasts. And because I wasn't on YouTube, and of course the power of YouTube is a big discovery engine, not a lot of people discovered it, but some people did. And so that little video that I posted back when I had hair, the little video I posted was because I would put out my sermons, and just 5 or 10 people would see it and watch it. And so many of the people that would write to me were functional hermits. What do I mean? They lived in their house. They would only maybe go out for necessities. They didn't have friends. And so their friends would be on the internet. And before that, I would go to people's homes and the television was on, and it was on all day. Why? So the silence of the home wouldn't crush them. And it was mind-numbing daytime TV. Why do you think, you all know what a soap opera is, why do you think soap operas are there? And before that, it was radio. And before that, it was books. But this is the domicide and the destruction of these familial networks. And don't get me wrong, we still live in the age of decay. We still live among sinners. And what families require of you is to figure out how to actually get along. And if you succeed, you will grow in wisdom and strength and character. And if you fail, your life will be destroyed. So in some ways, we've sort of had 500 years to flatten the curve. And so in a sense, we have people who are less capable of deeply productive relationships, but also fewer people who are destroyed by each other.
So, well, also think about it like this, because let's say you and Nate Heil haven't shared a whole lot of the same time together on like a live stream. But Nate's listened to your videos. You've listened to his videos.
Maybe.
And so in a way, there is that sort of, it's not just one side of the conversation. Like I was talking about with Justin's experience, there's two sides. Like, and yeah, I'm sure he's listened to your stuff.
Well,
sure
yeah, and that's the weird thing about time with
right.
podcasts, that with your found time, like,
And I think this found time dynamic is the same. I think it's, if we can do Vervaeke, if I can channel Vervaeke and say exaptation and things like that, we used to harvest the field or work in the shop or wash the laundry, and we were doing something with our hands and we were talking with our friends at the same time. It still happens if you work. You know, I loading trucks in the lumber yard when I was in college. That's how I worked my way through college, working in a lumber yard. You're loading a big load of lumber for someone. You're putting together skids of wood, and you know, sometimes you'd have to do it by yourself, but if you're like doing a lot, you'd have somebody do it. And you talk while you work. You talk while you work. And basically what's happening in this corner is that we're talking while we're working. And so one of the things that I did in the Bridges of Meaning Discord server was I had the open studio, because I set up a camera and I was sitting here working on sermons and I was virtually not alone. And that's where people would jump in. Now, the difficulty I had was I had a degree of status that when people were coming in to see me and to talk to me and to sort of get a randos conversation on the side, and I couldn't get any work done. So I had to stop that. And this is the hierarchies bind and blind, because to a degree, I became a platform person. And that's why, again, it's better to be 50 subs famous or 500 subs famous, because then, but there always will be hierarchies. There always will be the hot girl. These dynamics will always happen. You have to make your peace with them. But I think this capacity that we have to, I talk to people all the time. When do you listen to my stuff? I ask. When I'm doing the dishes, when I'm doing yard work, when I'm driving. Chad does it when he's working on tile. One woman said early on, I grew up with Ross Limbaugh's voice in my home, and now my kids are growing up with your voice in my home. And I thought, oh boy. But this is what we're doing. And so why? This is an adaptive function of Domicide, what we are doing in this little corner and what we are doing with podcasts. Because, you know, yesterday I don't often, because of my schedule and because of my priorities, I do a lot of audiobooks. And when you listen to Chad talk about his story in that video, I do a lot of audiobooks because my eyes are busy and my hands are busy. And to read, I need my eyes and my hands, and I need things to be steady. So yesterday I had a lot of airport time and restaurant time, so I could do some reading, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. But I'm just doing audiobooks and I'm doing podcasts because I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it might be when I'm 75, 80 years old, I'll get my eyes and my hands back, just as my eyes and my hands are failing, but we'll see. Now, this is a really precious little moment in the conversation.
I'm about out of time. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to hear from me before I go?
Can I just say I'm really sorry. I called your channel impenetrable.
Early on, Chad asked, you know, what Clara was finding, and she said Grizz's channel was impenetrable, and I have said it's unwatchable. But in the best way. Everybody's family is impenetrable. Everybody's marriage is impenetrable. If you're sitting with a particularly unhappy couple, it can take you a very long time to actually, they'll tell you what they're unhappy about, but why are they unhappy? It takes a ton of time, because we're all impenetrable, and really good communities are impenetrable. Now, Grizz is sort of smiling, and then Grizz is about to say something really profound.
He loves that. That'll probably be the theme. That'll probably be the theme of his next live stream. He loves that.
When you figure it out for yourself, it's yours.
Right there. And so it was said in the Justin, Christian, Pete podcast, talking about Martin Shaw, why good storytellers hide the gold, but they leave you enough hints to find the gold. I do this with training the dog all the time, because if it's too easy, we get bored. And what did Grizz just say right there? If you find it, it's yours. And that doesn't mean that everybody should watch Grim Grizz's channel. Grim Grizz's channel is full of gaming stuff, insider stuff, Dungeons and Dragons talk. They have savings throws. They have Harry Potter language. There's a generational aspect to Grim Grizz that I can't penetrate because I'm too old. But at the same time, once you find it, it's yours. And that's a trigger in this. And this is behind Jesus' parables. It's behind good storytelling. It's behind all of this, that don't say it plain, speak in parables, because when they find it, it's theirs and they won't forget it. Because if you just tell them, they will forget it. And so that's part of the genius of it. Little bit more background. Again, part of what we are seeing in this conversation is Clara's coming into the corner and doing these talks. And again, contact Grizz, or rather contact Chad or Sourdough Neil if you want to talk to her. She's very interested in talking to the women of the corner because, of course, that's, and so you women who want to talk to her, and it doesn't have to be recorded. I mean, she's writing things down. She's taking notes. She's studying us. But
maybe 5 years, I got the sense that it seemed like the culture at large had been becoming more and more susceptible to enchantment, which I think is a good thing. And so I started noticing people are becoming more interested in spiritual matters, whether it would be whatever. I don't care what side of the whatever, but they seem to have spiritual questions.
Sure.
And I often wondered, well, is it actually that's what's happening? Or is it just because I'm in recovery and constantly talking about God and all this stuff that I'm having this blue car effect where you constantly see blue cars when you have a blue car. So the question is something like, I want to know what you're experiencing upon as somebody who's newly tripped over this space. I want to know what that's like, because I don't know what it's like to trip over this space. Because by the time I got here, like, there was PBK. So I don't know what it's like to trip over this space exactly. I can tell you what after you.
Now this was very helpful, because again, when the channel started going, people are like, well, start a clips channel. It's like, part of what fueled Peterson was sort of a hive mind dynamic, that Peterson probably didn't know what his good stuff was until it started coming back to him. And so people all over the internet were making clips channel of Peterson. And Peterson was smart enough to, the stupidest channels out there are the ones that are restricting the clipping. It's like, no, I mean, if someone's just reposting as a whole, no, but if someone's commenting on it or messing around with it or doing something to it, they are adding value to it. So one of the genius things Peterson did early on was let the clips fly. Now, YouTube is running a very dangerous game for itself, because I just got a video. YouTube in the studio area always promotes these videos to try and help me be a better content creator. But what's happening right now is the last thing we need are content creators. And the best way to colonize this platform is with real people, which is what it was supposed to be about anyway. But again, it's the same dynamics with the conference. You've got to keep the hierarchies in mind. You can't just say, I hate hierarchies. Oh, okay. You just go yell at a field all by yourself. No, you've got to work these tensions, and competency is always working these irresolvable tensions, these wicked problems. And that, in fact, is the generation of wisdom. So Peterson let the clips fly. And so then when I started, it's like, no, I'm going to wait until people start playing with my stuff. And part of the desire to do randos conversations was just simply feedback, because feedback in church is horrible. And so it was so funny when MJ was like, I wonder if the pastor is doing surveys. No, a lot of the feedback I have to discern just by watching. And that's difficult because I got this little camera up there. Now with this live stream, I'm keeping an eye. I've gotten better now. I can kind of keep an eye on the live stream as we go on the chats, but feedback is very difficult. And so what's interesting about this is just what we've seen is just like I sort of talked about waves of the Jordan Peterson phenomena. We're seeing waves of the corner, and a new wave kicked off about 4 or 5 months ago with these new kinds of channels and a rush of new channels and a rush of people kind of coming in and doing different things. And that wave was different from, let's say, the wave that had the meaning code and Transfigured and some of these other, and Randos United. So we're seeing a maturing, we're seeing a different wave come in. And again, with every one of these waves, there are always trade-offs. There are wins and losses. It's the same with sort of the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, 4 years ago or so. So there's no going back, and there's always trade-offs. And so then as you evolve, you try to sort of maximize the cost of the trade-offs.
Answer. I'll tell you what my experience is like now. Excuse me, but I imagine my experience with tripping over. I didn't get to trip over this little corner of the internet. You know what I'm saying? I tripped over Paul Vanderklay and Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan, and that's
And what he means by that is, like, in the early days, people were coming around because they kind of came through Paul. And so there weren't all these other people with all these YouTube channels. So everyone kind of would like watch Paul's video of the day, or they might watch Peugeot or a Peterson video. Or so there was this smaller amount of content. And then so everyone was this deal, like, is there were probably maybe only 2 videos out that were kind of part of the corner at that day. So it was a lot easier to like just watch a couple of those videos. And then what was really cool is because everyone, it's kind of like when, I'm old enough to remember when there were only 4 channels pre-cable. Like, everyone watched the same thing. So when you went to school, like when Michael Jackson did the moonwalk for the first time live on the Motown Live or whatever, we were all at school talking about, did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. It was amazing. Like, everyone watched Michael Jackson.
Oh boy, did I mess up.
Live on TV. So there was this sense when you first came, it was a lot smaller. And then there were people doing something. And now you have which, by the way, it's great. Now you have all these people and all these different channels, and the stuff is just kind of exploded out. So to try and come in and get your head around Grimm, and then what's this? Who's this guy in this luchador mask? Like, this is crazy. What's going on with that? And then we got Paul, and we got all these other sort of people. And then people are doing these just chattings, like, what is this? And so, kind of put a fine point on that. It is a lot to take in right now.
Well, the closest I have to tripping over the corner is right after that whole thing where Paul Vanderklay was doing his commentary on the Jordan Peterson, John Peugeot conversation. This channel called Randos United, they also did a conversation, so they had a whole bunch of videos, but I never heard of any. I never knew what that was, and I'm watching these guys. I'm thinking, like, who do these guys think they are? Like who? And also, who the hell are they? And then
the Randos United were Bridges of Meaning Discord members.
Yes.
I love it. Who these guys think they are. I mean, Chad earlier in the video says, I came across Vanderklay and I thought he's just a grifter on Peterson. So click away. And then, of course, Peterson went away and he's looking for more content. And then he listened and is like, oh, and then he emailed me and then I wrote him back. And, here we are. So who do these people think they are? And by the way, who are they?
Would have conversations and then it would be posted on, because Paul called it Randos Conversations, right?
Have to give credit to Cassidy. Cassidy was the one who named the randos.
So the Randos United became where these individuals started doing these conversations and recording them and then uploading it to the Randos United.
Yeah. And those they are still very good. There's, I don't know, I think there's almost 700 videos over there. And they are fantastic. And
Clara, you have no idea how much work you walked into. You are not going to be lacking for resources.
I was very inspired by that concept of posting, of anybody can post, videos on that channel. I was inspired by that to do that here too. So, and that's the other thing we're always kind of like, it's like trading ideas and like all of my production on this channel now, almost all of it is inspired by the Grim Grizz is virtually not alone. I mean, things like this,
No, well, we don't do that.
Things like that. That's something that, just excuse me. I have all this stuff is inspired. We've all inspired each other in some way or influenced each other to pick up these little tools and use this stuff. So it's very cool. I like to call it like, this is play. We're playing, but it's a serious deal too. So, okay, now the question is, as somebody who has newly found this, like what is your experience like? What are you seeing?
Wow, yeah. So I have to confess here. Howard O'Neill told me about all this stuff like over 2 years ago. And he's like, yeah, you're kind of doing what they're doing. And I said, this a lot. Like, there's so much. I started looking up Jonathan Peugeot and Jordan Peterson and all these people. And I'm like, it's just, I didn't quite understand the significance of what was happening.
Let me know, Neil, if you want to say something.
No, keep going. I got plenty to say.
I didn't understand like sort of the meaning that if you sit and sort of listen to some of the content, you're like, wow, these people are really kind of cultivating this, this really rich. And then I guess you got T-Grog on there and you're kind of like, he's the scapegoat. Okay. Sorry, man. We've all been there. And then you got people saying, we've all been there. We've all been there. So I don't know. Cause like the last time I was kind of tuned into this world was probably, mid 2010s, right? When you had Chris Hitchens and you had the New Atheist, Sam Harris, you had Richard Dawkins, some of these people and Daniel Dennett kind of like jerks, but now you've got all of this pushback and that's how I see it. You get all of these people really sort of coming into this rich and meaningful conversation after maybe not being satisfied by that, and then maybe a whole lot going on that I just haven't figured out yet and don't know what's happening. So I feel like I'm missing a lot.
I found it fascinating that she connected it with the New Atheists, which of course is what Justin Brierley is doing now. That better be you, Gavin, behind that cat, or I'm booting you out. I'll tell you that right now.
Can you hear my voice?
Oh gosh, what have I opened myself up for?
I can change it. I can go off the.
No, as long as because I don't want any how things can happen on the internet. That's part of the reason that we don't do anonymous. But anyway,
I'll change it up.
Nice to meet you, PVK.
Oh, that's pretty good. I think actually, I think it's a lot more simple than like this is what's interesting about it for me. This is why yesterday I was thinking about. So I woke up yesterday. I was just in like just a funk. I was not in a good mood. I was feeling.
I love this part of the video.
Disconnected. Part of it has to do with for the last probably month and a half, the weather was really cold, and I can make up excuses, but I stepped away from my daily practice of walking the dogs, and during my dog walk, I was doing some different prayers and stuff like that were really helpful. And it's just so weird how something so simple can just get me connected. Well, I wasn't doing it, and slow, and so I'm coasting. The problem with coasting is you're always going downhill when you coast.
First of all, the great thing is spiritual disciplines are wonderful if you do them. And the second thing is that great AA aphorism that's just so typical AA. You only coast downhill. I love it. So if you guys want to talk or make a point, just raise your hand and I'll pause.
So I'm coasting along, and I just, I'm naturally a discontented person. Like, I'm just a malcontent. And so what ends up happening is I'm just feeling a little disconnected. And yesterday morning was kind of like, I was just woke up and I'm just like, God damn it, dude. I got a momentary lapse of nihilism, and it comes and goes. Now here's where faith is. I know that it's just going to show up, and like, I know I can get out of it, and it's not a big deal. But it doesn't mean I can't stop myself from feeling it. So I wake up, I get up, I call Gavin. We're doing our morning thing. I even tell him by the end of that, I'm like, I just feel like shit, man. I don't know. And he doesn't try and fix me or anything like that. He just says, okay, And then I get to work. I'm working, and on comes Luke Thompson on the Grail Country stream, and it's pretty cool. And then, that's always a really nice thing to listen to. I love Luke, and I often talk to Luke in my.
Again, we are women at the stream. We are men harvesting. And crap, I gotta go put up that barn, but we're gonna put up that barn with each other, and we get there and we lift each other out of our individual funk.
Private time and stuff like that too. And then, Gavin starts telling his story on there. I'm like, oh, this is really cool and stuff. And then Grim Grizz show comes on. And all the while I'm tiling this bathroom. And Grim Grizz show comes on. And it's a hilarious show. And I get to engage a little bit in the hive mind, which is the comment section, in case people don't know that. That's the live chat comment section. It's the hive mind. And it's a great show. And then I'm like, oh, shit, Neil's got a conversation that's got released with Alan. So on the channel. I'm going to go listen to that because I haven't listened to it. And I'm listening to it. And I'm like, this is such a really good conversation, man. It's like really good. And then
And part of what's happening is we're not listening to the big channels anymore. I listen to big channels if some of you talk about it or send it to me or share it on your little channel. Otherwise, I'm listening. These are the famous 500, the famous 5 milers here. And because I value what you have to say. Yeah, it's good to meet you, Neil. Neil and I haven't even, really, I got to have Neil on for a conversation because Neil, what you've been doing on Chad's channel is just amazing. I regularly, I see your insights and it's like, wow, because that's why you've been showing up in videos, but I haven't even had much time to make it. So thanks for being here, Neil.
I've learned a lot from you. You're not my internet pastor, but I've learned a lot from you. So, and it's a pleasure to meet you. And yeah, it's been a pleasure slowly, gradually, steadily coming out of the lurk. And I would say I now have 2 or 3 people that I would consider not only friends, but friends that probably know me close to as well as, not the innermost ring of people in my life, but probably that second ring. And so I have 2 or 3 people in this space now that know me that well. And is that all illusory because it's all virtual? We're going to find out, but I don't think so. So,
yeah. Did you want to say something, Cal? You unmuted.
No, I'm just happy to be here. It's Friday.
All right.
Right after that, Christian Baxter, this new baller comes up and he releases a conversation with Mike Pilato, who I have scheduled in the next month to have a conversation with. So I'm like, I'm going to listen to these guys talk. And holy shit, Mike Pilato is outstanding. Like, I'm like, wow. And while all this is happening, I just think, how did this happen? Like, how do people, how did we get to be, how did we get to have this? Like, we don't understand, and maybe I'm being dramatic, but I don't think we understand how the potential that's sitting here. I don't think we do. You know, I've spent the last 10 years, I'm coming up on 10 years of sobriety. I've spent a good portion of that studying the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've often wondered what it would have been like to be those guys who helped be the founders of AA. And I think, and I've thought that for for a very long time, and fascinated about how cool would it have been to be these two drunks to accidentally stumble over this thing and then watch something grow before your very eyes. And then I'm sitting here and I'm listening to my friends. I had every one of these guys' phone numbers, and I'm listening to these guys, and they are just like enjoying their time, having meaningful conversations. And I think maybe it felt like this. Maybe Bill and Bob and those early AA old timers, or those early guys, maybe it felt like this. And so I don't think we understand the potential. Now, again, I could be speaking out of my ass and just being really dramatic, but I don't think that that's the case, because if this was just some fly-by-night bullshit, it would have died a long time ago.
Well, I think it's
that to me was a holy moment. That was a holy moment.
Certainly needed your savings throws against it.
You needed the heart savings throws because it was pulling out my heart. I don't know. You got any? I got another clip to play, but anybody want to say something about that clip?
I guess I've never quite admitted maybe how therapeutic it all is, because I'm deeply suspect of therapy or the therapeutic, just unless it comes along as a secondary effect of something that I'm doing that's meaningful.
Yeah. No, I touched on that earlier. I forget who was saying it, or Lance was saying it. It is therapeutic. We are doing this. That we human beings have a bent towards our healing and our destruction. I mean, it's we have them both. But and I think
the reason why, when you think of the things that give you that feeling, like hang out with your friends, right? Doing something else, right? That, let's say that you and your friends go out fishing or something like that. It's the fun. I mean, yeah, there's the fishing, and if the fishing goes well, it's fun, or it's, but that's almost like the pretense that you need in order to like be with one another. What is the stereotype is that, women do this sort of face-to-face friendship and men do, shoulder to shoulder, side-by-side friendship, and which makes this is an interesting phenomena, given the fact that we sort of do this weird virtual face-to-face stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no one told you that it was gonna be this way? Your life's a joke. You're broke. You watch YouTube all day. Pastor Paul Vanderclay, you have yet to address that you've been challenged in the April Fool's Conversation cage match.
You think you're man enough?
I do, and I'd like your commitment to the match at this time, sir.
I will meet you. I will meet you on the 1st of April, Grim Grizz.
Excellent. Excellent.
I will meet you, and you will never forget.
Legendary.
Will you meet us both?
I will meet anyone you want to bring into that arena.
I got to turn that mustache upside down, turn that frown upside down. You got to turn
and as in a final bit of accountability stalking, I've been teased that there was going to be a Defense Against the Dark Arts conversation, recorded or not, between Cale and Paul Vanderklay, and I don't know
on the schedule.
All right, it's on the schedule.
He's hard to get into, Graham. I don't know if you know this or not.
He filled this whole thing with randos, and bore the burden because he was so blessed.
Can we like get?
So first of all, stop singing to us from a different branch. You know, this is our branch, and that's your branch, and we got to keep the branches separate. So,
can we get like a different? I think I need another layer. You know, not just we've got sort of like the big accounts, as you like to say, Paul, and you've got the randos, but like, what about like, I don't have any subs because I don't do my show. So like, is there some sort of in-between thing that we can get here? I need status, man. I need some status.
You need him to lend you some agency. I think that's how Grim Grizz put it at one point.
That's right.
Well, see, that's one of the regrets about my performance at the summit is I didn't walk away with the Daily Wire contract. But we have to imagine, we have to put ourselves in the situation where, like, if the Daily Wire sends staff and a budget, what would they send? What would they use? How would they work it? Like, if we were working with CAA instead of a parallel to CAA, how would we be doing things? And I think that we're at that point. We've become self-referential enough to permanently exist.
What if people were just volunteering out of the goodness of their heart to work with you, Grim? And what if they just gave you the things that you needed without expecting payment in return? What if that was possible? Wouldn't that be?
That I don't have the knowledge of the structure of the positions that be filled and what they would do. Like, I know we need a storyboarder, and like I can see some of the positions, but like I'd love the official professionals, what positions they have, so I can mock their structure.
You need Paul to ask for the org chart. Paul, you need to ask, you need to ask them for the org chart.
Daily Wire folks, please send us your organizational chart.
They can knock out the names. We don't need to know the people, just the structure of the thing.
I want to know if they signed you for Daily Wire, would I stop watching you too?
Oh, snap. Well, singes the nostril.
Clip it and briss it.
I haven't had the opportunity to sell out yet, but I'll let you all know as soon as I do, on behalf of the Sacred Order of Foolish Transparency.
All right.
I see the assassins have failed.
One more clip.
Jonathan Peugeot, Jordan Peterson talk about this stuff all the time. It's like what you attend to, like what you focus on, like is going to manifest itself in your life. So if you're out there consuming all this junk that's out there, I mean, you take on this sort of thing, and to be able to just participate and hear these conversations, which are so unique, right? And then people ask, like, again, they ask really hard questions. People are willing to think out loud, and you're sitting back there like, oh my gosh, I've always thought about that. I didn't have the guts to ask it or whatever, or I didn't have anybody to talk about that with or whatever. There's this, it's to me, it's almost like what Chad talked about. It's like it's counter programming. And kind of that's how it's worked for me a little bit, in that I'm not getting sucked up into this other thing. And when I have time, and it's, there's been peaks, like I've had time where I've had more time to focus, and other times I'm super busy where I just can't keep up at all. Like I went through for a few months where I just couldn't really, I watched very little or whatever, and was kind of a little bit involved with it. But when I actually am participating more and listening more and being a part of this community, like, my spiritual life is better. Like spiritually, I'm a better person. It reminds me of these things that can get me into action in terms of practices and so on and so forth. And Bernardo Kastrup had this amazing book called is it the Mass Formation Psychosis or whatever? At any rate, he was talking about, like, with what's going on right now, is that what we need to do is we just need to speak, and really what we're putting out are beacons of light, and people will find their way here. And I think people come here for a lot of different reasons. But if you really want to kind of come down, when you think about, let's just take the Christian angle to it. Jonathan Pageau is clearly talking about Christian things in terms of a symbolic way and so on and so forth. Jordan Peterson really started to kick off. He had his biblical series, and he's contemplating all the big, hairy questions about God and so on and so forth, right? He tackled Genesis, and then he had his Exodus thing. Like, that's what he's about. Obviously, we're here because there's a pastor in Sacramento named Paul Vanderklay, who's clearly a Christian man, right? So even atheists or people who deconstructed or people who had left the church and been hurt by the church or whatever, all sorts of, or people come in and, you know, maybe they're struggling in some aspect, or, you know, or maybe they are Christian, whatever it is. There absolutely is a Christian element to this. Our desire is that, like, if T-Grog, like, I don't know if when he first showed up, like, everyone, because he was in the comments, you know, making a lot of comments, and then he finally showed up on the screen, and literally people were cheering. And Grim highlighted this, like, when he finally came up and showed up on the screen, because Paul jokes is that we're running out of atheists. And there's two reasons why we're running out of atheists. Is we're running out of atheists because a lot of the atheists come in atheists, and all of a sudden they find themselves going to church. So there's that problem, because atheists are becoming Christians as they come into this little corner. And then the other thing is like certain folks, because we don't play, if it's just, you won't come in and be able to have some sort of open-minded communication. Eventually this is going to frustrate you if you just keep wanting to do this, and we're kind of like, we get it, but were you open to seeing this? No, this. You know, at some point that becomes here. Yet you'll see someone like Grim, and he, like he said, he wouldn't identify like that. I think he's on his new thing, but I think Grim's still on his journey. I think that he says that pretty explicitly, you know, to some of the stuff. I think he's still on this journey. And so, you know, there definitely is, there absolutely is the Christian element. And again, if you're going to come through Pastor Vanderklay, if you're watching his YouTube channel, he's talking, you know, he has Sunday morning service. He's living still. He was always talking about that. People are asking questions, and he's talking about Christianity in this really interesting cultural monologue way. Like, it's incredible how he kind of paints this stuff around that. So there definitely is that draw that I think, even if people don't realize it, there's something about this Christianity that I think people are trying to figure out when they come into. You think that's fair, Chad?
Yeah, I think, yeah, like
all right, that's my clip. That's all the clips I had lined up. So,
have we frightened T-Grog away?
Could be
all the attention at this point.
Could be, but one of the things you get used to as a pastor is people leave, and then a few of them come back. It's like, you know, there's a story about 10 lepers. Jesus heals them all. One comes back.
Right.
And, you know, there is, we have so much the mind of a machine. And when Jesus is talking about this stuff, it's like, this is how the world works. So we'll see. We'll see.
I think Chad, when he was talking about the practices, like I've heard like Grim Grows talk about, I guess there's some branding where there's something about self-control, but our environment and our practices are so powerful. Like, we change our environment or change our routines and our practices, and it looks like self-control. You know, it looks like all of a sudden your mind starts working different. So I thought that was really interesting about the clip you showed. And I guess we're kind of doing that as well, right? We're doing a practice of some kind instead of watching the nasty thing on Netflix that Kel mentioned at one point.
Well, in Lance's comment, I mean, all the attention is about people deconstructing from religion and no longer going to church. Where's all the attention about people deconstructing from the political grift? I mean, 2015 hit, and it's like, I'm done. I'm done with the church of politics. I am just done. I don't want to have anything to do with any of you people anymore. and I might be subject to you, but boy, I'll tell you, I'm just done. And we don't see that because we don't leave the country, but people do leave church.
Well, I think it's getting more and more boring with time, and that comforts me a lot. And I think one thing we stumbled upon here, because I didn't realize this until I actually got involved, but I think Luke put out this idea initially, but what we stumbled upon here is we are deciding to treat people as more important than ideas. That's what it seems to me. And I don't see any other space on the internet. Well, a good church does that. A good church says, gather them in. We're going to sort them out later. Gather them in and let's see what we can do. That's a good church. But we seem to be doing that. We seem to be gathering them in, people who want to participate in that spirit.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about that, the sort of the big tent model, Neil, that why are we, Paul, I've been diving back into Reformations, as you were sort of talking about it last week, I think, and just going into it. And it's really sad. It's profoundly sad. And I think we talked about this before, maybe Neil, and you and we've talked about it, Paul. But and I know Christian was sort of talking about the walls are being kind of dissolved and brought down for a variety of different reasons, interdenominationally and others. Hey, Luke, and you go back and there's a reason why everybody dates this like roughly 500-year period, right? Because you're confronted with all the radical changes and explosions that happened between roughly 1475 and 1550, or whatever. It's like 100 or so years, and everybody gets supercharged and puts knives and swords to each other's throats. It's like, what do you believe? What do you believe? What do you believe? And it's kind of a question that is utterly just dumb, frankly. Broadly understood. 100 years prior to that. And so this little corner almost gives us maybe an experience of what would it be like if we didn't have the Inquisitor breathing down our neck. What would it feel like if we didn't have the Prince telling us what we have to believe because we live in a certain zip code? What would it be like if and I jokingly say this all the time, but I really do mean it. Like, we're all heretics, LOL, and yuck, 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 so say we all, right? And that it's okay to sort of say that in now in a way that it wasn't okay to say that 5 years ago. Maybe the exhaustion you said, the boredom with post 2016. It's like,
definitely not 600 years ago.
Right. So I don't know, and Paul, do you feel like this is heralding a new era in which a lot of those sort of drawn swords are being put down, like put back in the scabbard? Or
I don't know, Jan Hus, that didn't go so well.
No, I know. No,
absolutely. You just don't know. One of the beauty of that book Reformations is he nicely shows that the Protestant Reformation was one expression of a far broader thing that was happening all over Western Europe. And then it got expressed in many dimensions, some within the Roman Catholic Church and some outside the Roman Catholic Church. And it had deep ramifications all the way along.
Now, it wasn't even outside yet. You see, I think the point that he's making is that all of this is happening, it's almost like Luther comes and just sort of presses the button to say, yeah, like, unity's not real. This sort of this de facto sense of universal, like, we're really universal, because, and that's what I mean about the sadness, right? That it's almost like pointing out the Father's nakedness. It's this sort of this, you can't, like, once you say it, you can't like unsay it. And so there was no such thing as outside, unless you were excommunicated, like, actually. And like, that meant way more than just like, I have a different idea. The whole idea of banishment is it's real, but it's not for us. I don't know. Being incoherent, apologies.
Good.
Welcome, Caleb.
Hey, man.
Hello.
Luke has made an appearance. Ta-da.
You told me to. I'm here.
Opine, my man. Opine.
I think that part of what's difficult is that there's so much going on at once, and there always is. And we are an expression. We are definitely an expression of our time right now and of the technological disruption. But I think we can, at least at this point, up until this point, we've been a fairly sweet expression of it.
I kind of want to prompt Luke. Like, as Kel was talking, I was thinking of a thought that maybe Luke was saying, and Luke hopped in, and it's like, I was reminded of a testimony with a lady who had a backslide, and she ended up, at these music festivals, she meets with someone, 10 years later, she's bringing 4 people to Jesus, right? So it's like, if you look at history through that, the kind of wider view, something like a Reformation and terrible things happening can play into a bigger picture that's beautiful. And I think Luke has said things like that.
I mean, it's a very Chinese farmer thing, or it's a that really reminds me of this. There's a character in that book that I just read, Little Big, who goes through this major heartbreak where this woman ends up leaving him, and then he ends up like a drunk, and he's on the street for a long time, but he goes through this long period and kind of comes out of it. And there's a section in there, I can't remember exactly how the author says it, but he had kind of he said he learned through his period of drunkenness and being on the street that he just got used to people staring at him, and he didn't really care what people thought. And so he learned these skills through just being a social reject that allowed him then later to be doing things and to have gifts that he would have never had otherwise. And so I'm
glad the Lord is giving you books that help you understand me better.
So, I mean, there's that really is like, that's my meditation of late, is everything's a gift if you receive it as a gift. And so, and deconstruction isn't bad. Like to deconstruct from a false idol and a conception of God. I mean, great. May we all deconstruct.
Yeah. And when you're in it, it's sad. Like to Kel's point, like there's a sadness when you're in it, but in hindsight, things you might actually see that it was good or very
well. And there's losses of community and all that kind of stuff. But what if community evolves to the point where people going through that process then aren't rejected by the community? Like,
well, in that vein, let's acknowledge that Caleb and John Adamson have joined the stream. Caleb first was, so hello. Say things, maybe?
Actually, yeah. Hello, people. Can you hear me all right? Real quick. So, yeah, actually, I was wondering. Actually, I probably should let John introduce himself before I make a comment. Let's say hello first.
Hello.
Perfect.
Okay, great. I was going to say, I was wondering if deconstruction is actually typically necessary, though, because in the, before, and this is maybe just, well, for instance, I don't think I've gone through a particular, and maybe I have to, a particularly dramatic deconstruction in order to arrive to my beliefs. I think they kind of just built on top of each other over time. And there are instances in which I had discovered, oh, this belief wasn't strong enough to build on, but I didn't necessarily have to deconstruct that kind of, torn down what was not necessary and just, but it's not like a deconstruction as such. It's more like just a building on top of.
I don't think everybody goes through it. I'm reminded of doubting Thomas. Christ says, "Blessed are those who believe without seeing," whereas doubting Thomas clearly had a deconstruction of some kind. We don't know. We don't know the details of that. But I think to some of us it's necessary, and others, blessed are you who simply are able to believe. It's a beautiful thing when it happens. Yeah, but I think this space in general is made up of a lot of people who were in the darkness and at least believe there is a light. They might not have found the light yet, but they believe that there's a light.
Okay. No,
Well, and like I said, I never deconstructed that way because I don't even know what it would be like to not believe in God. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it at all, which has troubled me a little bit sometimes, but I've sure gone through doubting certain doctrines and faith and rethinking them and learning new things. But that's just, of course, like I just can't imagine not doing that.
I wonder, because there was a period in time in which I felt I couldn't properly construct my beliefs, and so I had ended up doing the sort of the equivalent revolution, the revolution of thinking equivalent to deconstruction for me wasn't necessarily learning, like having to deconstruct and then build up again, but learning that I could build up to begin with. And I wonder if there's at least something like that that's necessary. It's necessary in my own case, obviously, but I don't know.
There he is.
Grog is in the house.
Oh,
we were worried about you.
Grog, I'd really like to have a one-on-one conversation with you, and we could talk about the stock market and the random walk down Wall Street and why the stock market is an approximation of the real value of companies, which is an approximation of this space, the real value of what's being done in this space. But anyway, we could have that conversation if you want.
And you've been challenged to an April Fool's Conversation cage match moderated by me with one Saul Ron Copperman. So we're waiting for your acceptance of that challenge, much as Pastor Paul Vanderclay accepted my April Fool's Conversation cage match challenge earlier in this stream.
T-Grog is officially the hot girl in the corner right now.
He still is. Yeah,
Take
he's
it
playing
back.
hard to get.
Take it
I want to
back,
hear
Paul.
I want to hear from John Adamson. John.
I guess it's hard to paradox is everywhere, and I have the hardest time wrapping my head around. Luke said he couldn't understand the universe without God. Well, I've lived much of my life in that universe, and I wasn't most of that time not a materialist. So I didn't go into the whole science is God thing. In fact, I think that's a little bit shallow. But it's the first two commandments. How do you stay sane? For instance, are we going to have memory in heaven? Are we going to remember all the people that we loved because we were commanded to love, that are now in hell? And love the God that set up the system which eventuated that. And I don't know. God is merciful, but God is just. And yet, how else to say it? I saw Jordan Peterson just a couple of weeks ago, and he said it before, but really hit me hard, that just because you haven't done things to people that are vicious and corrupt doesn't mean that you're not capable of it. It just might mean You were just too weak to exercise it. In other words, I deserve to burn in hell. Right? And it comes to the children of Israel. It was a covenant with God. But God had to uphold both sides of that covenant, because God is the only one perfect and holy and able to hold up the covenant. All we can do is take the gift from God and believe, and more than believe. Can I get any feedback from anybody on this?
I was going to make Pastor Paul go first.
Yeah, this is mostly to Paul. Sorry, Paul. You're
muted, dude. I get +4.
Corn cob.
I didn't. Did I see it? Did I see an emoji?
Just +2. Just +2.
Oh. I often listen, John. Like if it were just you and I in your room, I would be listening. And this is why we need in real life pastors, because, and why we do randos conversations, because to know the contours of your struggle requires more context. You gave us mostly the theological language, but that's pretty generic. And the part of, Peugeot also had some pretty good answers recently about heaven and hell. Part of we have sort of been lured into ways of framing and thinking about the world, and our language has sort of fallen into those traps. For years I've said, heaven is in Santa Barbara and hell is in Stockton. Now that plays in California because people know Stockton and Santa Barbara. They're not simply places. That doesn't mean place isn't a part of it. But you really have to lean into Jesus when he says, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open. And the amazing thing is that doesn't mean magic. It does mean transformation. So I don't know that I don't know. Similar to what Chad said when he so described something that many of us can identify with, that you wake up in the morning, you're kind of feeling crappy. Maybe you have too much work on your plate. Maybe you had a fight with your wife or your spouse or your friend or something like that. And you go into work, and we sort of need each other to buoy one another in these moments, because the moments aren't the life, even though life is somehow made up of successive moments. So it's often the case that I wish I had a solution. I love that conversation. You're Zach, you're kind of, you might mute you. Or maybe it's you that's
Is that me?
Yeah, it could be.
Oops.
Welcome to live internet.
Yeah. Well, maybe it isn't you. The one, I forget the name of the philosopher. Howland, Jacob Howland. He said, every time I hear the word solution, I can't help but put final in front of it.
That's pretty dark.
It's dark, but there's a lot of truth to it. Because one of the things that I look at is with all of our sort of magical thinking, the New Testament would look like a very different thing. Because you have the Son of God talking to people, and most of them don't believe. What's with that? Now you have these passages where he's healing everybody from their illnesses, and he's very popular. But when it comes right down to it, on Easter Sunday morning, the only people there are some women who are looking to embalm a corpse. What's with that? There are these aspects to the gospel that resist solutions. And what I so often find in my own life is that the burdens that I'm given to bear are here to change me in ways that I really don't want to be changed. And so we wrestle with God. You know, I know so little of you, John. I can see the oxygen, and then suddenly my mind fills up with, you know, 2 people in my church right now who are on oxygen. And I begin to assume things about you, which may or may not be true. And then I try to speak out of those frameworks, but that's why we need to know and be known. And why videos don't work in the way that we think they should.
God, Zach, would you pleasant mute? You see there's a little microphone with this. There you go. You've done it correctly. Thank you very much.
I don't think it's him.
John, the judge is way better than us, and you just got to put faith that you'll be judged fairly, because you burn yourself up worrying about your own status. And I don't know if he's there. This whole thing is way more beautiful than we could have ever imagined, because we are limited in that way. And so seeking you shall find, trust the judge, and it's probably way better than you thought.
And that's sort of where I go to, because I don't worry about God not judging rightly. Because if God doesn't judge aright, then there's no point to anything. There isn't. There's no point. If God is evil, there's no point to any of this. We're just all screwed in ways that are unimaginably bad. And so I don't go there.
And if God's justice is a mercy, then it's all good.
Yeah.
I guess where I would encourage you is most of the ways that people conceive of as hell, I don't think are accurate at all. They're based on Far Side comics and not even on text, despite that people want them to believe that they're based on text. They're not. Nobody knows what happens when you die, despite what they tell you. So like all that stuff is much ado about nothing. What if you're judged for worrying? You know, like, I mean, just none of that stuff you can even control. You know, you just gotta, you know, as Frozen 2 says, as my wife likes to say, take the next right step.
I have to end this stream because I got a dog that's got to eat lunch. So this is where we need the 24-hour TLC network. I don't know if anybody's going to keep the stream going.
Does Alan get to say anything?
No, Alan can definitely talk. Enough.
Enough. No, I just I love the Aaron Wren conversation, and yeah, I guess one thing I was thinking about is like becoming a Christian and all this stuff is it really makes you realize how my decision, like my current decision making, is realizing that how bad my decision making is on my own. And I think a lot of the lost wisdom that we have, and Aaron Wren sort of talks about this, is it's not that he has the solutions, it's that there's a mechanism for getting better answers. That I think there have been doors that have been closed, and I think the corner participates in that. But yeah, it's frustrating. I think his talk on dating culture is a good example of lost wisdom, because people used to do things differently than we do now.
All right, Sandy, what say you? Oh, you got on mute.
I never watch these live streams because I'm always at work. But I'm sick, so me and the Vicks are hanging out in the couch. I was trying to type some answers to Rob's question. It sounded like it was, I don't know. I was listening to a discussion yesterday or the day before, talking about some of the judgment things, and I was putting a very choppy answer into the text part, which, every time you get down to 30 words. I have no idea exactly what was asked, but I've been thinking I'm a week past burying my ex-husband from his fifth stroke. He was so scared he was going to be laying where he was for about 10 years, and 9 months was as long as he could tolerate. So I'm kind of, but the thing is, I started out by saying he was an amazing man. He was also the same person that he was, which was the reason that me and the kids left him. But I still say he's an amazing man, and that's one of the things that I was trying to say in the in the text, was that we look at God's judgment and we look at God's mercy, and when we start, like, it really grabbed me what you said, John, about I can't remember. I wrote it into things. Is what comes from head cold. Like, we talk about ourselves being worthy of hell, and the discussion the other day is like we're looking at how we put into all of our different catechisms and things that have been made up over the different churches how unworthy we are. So therefore we need. But I don't think that really faith and belief are just about need. I think God made us because he wanted us. And the day by day, whatever we bring, I understand the ongoing things of asking for forgiveness for little things. I understand the ongoing difficulty of giving forgiveness, asking forgiveness, any gamut of that. Sometimes I think those are the real lessons. And it's not whether we deserve hell or heaven or whatever comes after. It's, are we making the most of what we're doing right here and right now? Because, heck, what's the chances I'd be laying here today listening to this? I'm enjoying it, by the way. But the end of life is difficult. You get to see 1,000 people that you haven't seen for 10, 20, 30 years. And every one of those moments that you've spent with them, whenever that was, those things come to life again. And God does that every day. Like when Paul was saying, sometimes people walk away and they come back. You never know. I couldn't predict who was going to show up on Wednesday. I couldn't predict whether I was, going to be able to say what I stood up to say. And basically, the sum total of what I came down to was, we went through a lot of crap, some really tough stuff. we did really well as parents with a disabled child, even though we screwed up a lot of it. And the real question that went from very beginning of our lives to the end of lives is, do we deserve this? Why do people show up? Why do I have friends? Why does anybody love me? Why does God love me? I think we're all always going to walk that out right up until the last moment. And no matter what we do with it theologically, I'm kind of good with that, because I kind of think that's the really important part, is just walk it out. And I'm chronically surprised at the people that are willing to show love in tough places, or the ones that, I haven't talked to for 6 months, who suddenly pop in a text line, hey, how are you doing? I was just thinking about you. That's what we carry forward. That's what I carry forward. And I'm hoping that's what my ex carries forward, because he's still left going, I have no idea why God loves me. And I would try and tell him. We can't tell each other, apparently, because we keep trying. Somewhere inside, we've just got to go, wow, isn't that strange? God loves me. What am I going to do about that?
I think that's a good place to land the plane. God loves me. Can't tell you why, especially some days. Thank you, Sandy. I hope you feel better. I hope being here has been helpful, John. Thank you for coming in. Thanks and keep coming around. So I'm gonna land the plane. A little bit of branding. How's that sound?
watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of mockers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Everything he does prospers, not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. Fast Freddy G knows it all. That's my old name, G.